All right, we are nearing the end of new material, if you can believe it. We are in the fourth to last class, which is class 78, the communist superpowers of the Cold War era. And I know when you see that word superpowers, it probably has kind of a Marvel comic book vibe to you. But at the time, that was the term used for the two sides of the Cold War. They called them superpowers. Now, this is a 2-day lesson, and I'm going to assume you missed the first day of class. And the first half of the first day is this rectangle here, class 78 opening. And I hopefully reiterated a point you already know. Art reflects culture, culture reflects art. And my point was big, blockbuster Hollywood movies were all about the Cold War and captured that Cold War fervor. And then we checked out some 80s, 90s Cold War songs by popular artists to reiterate that point. Now, if you missed class, the two links I really would like you to watch. This one here, The Complete History of the Soviet Union to the Melody of Tetris. It's a bit bizarre, but it actually is pretty good in terms of content. And watch this link. This speech sums up the Cold War better than anything. So once we moved away from the pop culture aspect of the Cold War, we went into the assignment for the second half of class, and more academic than pop culture. And as you can see, it looks like a pretty standard worksheet that is empty. And I'm going to ask you at least, to make it not so empty. And you can do that by either looking at this PowerPoint or by continuing watching this video, and I'll do my best to break this down. Now, if you missed the second class, we are going to reiterate today's material and work on an SAQ. Really dig into an SAQ as we get close to the testing date. So reiterate my point one more time. If you missed the first day, check this out first, then fill out this worksheet. If you missed the second day of this lesson, complete this, complete the SAQ. Okay, now in terms of the academic material for both days, I'm going to go over it right now. And again, class 78, the communist superpowers. We're talking about the USSR and China. These were the two heavy hitters at the time. And I'm going to reiterate this one more time. If I were to ask you, who are the two big heavy hitters on the communist side, you would say the USSR and you would say China. Hopefully you recognize these people by now. I think I've beat you over the head with them last couple days. So anyway, let's talk about Joseph Stalin. A lot of this is old hat, but I really need to reiterate this point. So he ruled the Soviet Union for a long time, 1927 to 1953. One of history's most cruel leaders. Absolutely iron-fisted cruelty. He ruled as a fascist, okay? And his policies resulted in mass starvations, imprisonment, increases in Cold War tension. He was a very, very evil man. But you could argue, on the other side, AP is all about arguing, that he did get the Soviet Union through World War II, and he got the Soviet Union nuclear weapons, that sort of thing. So Stalin. Okay, Mao Zedong. Now, Mao Zedong, also known as Chairman Mao, was a Chinese communist revolutionary who was the founder of the People's Republic of China, which he ruled as the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party from 1949 till 1976, a long time. Similar to Stalin, his collectivization policies resulted in mass starvations and migrations of Chinese peoples. He, too, was a fascist and ruled with absolute authority. So a lot of commonalities between Stalin and Mao Zedong. Now, when Mao Zedong passed away, Deng Xiaoping took over. If you are a Chinese student, I apologize for my pronunciation. I know it's very poor. And he took over from Mao and became China's leader from 78 to 89. He made changes that result in what created modern China. The China we know today, I think you can make a fair argument, can be traced to Deng Xiaoping and his policies and his vision. Now, he kept hardline policies in regards to human rights, but he opened up the nation economically. These are the results we see today as we have this enormous trade imbalance between China and the United States. Okay, Mikhail Gorbachev. Now, he was the general secretary of the Communist Party. Now, he was the 8th and final leader of the USSR. Now, during his time, he navigated the USSR's transition to Russia and the independent nations that are around it. This marked the end of the Cold War. And these changes happened when I was in high school, and nations that were part of the USSR, many new nations emerged, and Gorbachev navigated all of that. Okay. Now, the CCP, or the Chinese Communist Party, was founded by Mao Zedong in 1921, and this still remains the only governing body in China. Now, they permit 8 other minor parties, but ultimately there's really no political competition. Presently, they are still in control, and their policies are still communist in many respects, except the economy. So it's not a pure form of communism, and their economic growth in the last 30 years is pretty strong evidence for that. Now, you've heard me say this word collectivization a couple times, and you've heard me say it in class several times, but this is at the crux philosophically of communism. The problem with it is it eliminates incentives and it ends poorly. That is communism's biggest failing. I know a lot of you are working hard in school and trying to keep good grades because you want to economically better yourself. You want to get into an occupation that pays you a lot. That's why you're putting in the work. If everybody gets the same regardless of education, why put in the work? And the moral of the story is you don't. You have to force people to do things. And on a more, gruesome level, collectivization resulted in millions of people dying, okay, in terms of food and whatnot. And I know we're, all living in cities, the people I'm talking to who are my students, but think about a farmer who is growing food. Their motivation is to grow more food to get more money. The more food they grow, the more food they sell, the more money they make. Therefore, we have a lot of food. When you lose that incentive, well, you know what happens already. Okay, so Stalin's 5-year plan, to reiterate this one more time. Now, Stalin in 1928 launched the first 5-year plan. It was designed to industrialize the USSR in the shortest possible time, and in the process to expedite the collectivization of farms. Although it did make the USSR an industrial power, huge human cost in making this happen. Failed miserably in terms of human life. Now, if you look at Chinese policy, the Great Leap Forward of the People's Republic of China was an economic and social campaign led by the Chinese Communist Party. Chairman Mao Zedong launched the campaign to reconstruct the country from an agrarian economy into a communist economy through the formation of people's communes. Untold people died. We don't even know. One of the worst famines, probably the worst famine in human history. Hopefully by now you've seen communism has not worked, and it will not work. For that fundamental reason, it kills incentive. Now, NATO. NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, also known as the North Atlantic Alliance, is an intergovernmental military alliance between 30 European and North American countries. So this remains from the Cold War. Originally there were 12. It still remains, and they are still meeting and doing NATO actions during this time. The Warsaw Pact was the communist equivalent of that, where originally there were 8 original members. Now, China chose not to join this alliance, although they loosely supported it. This is a key decision in world history. If China would have joined the Warsaw Pact, would have been a different outcome, I would argue. So this pact did not last like NATO did. It did end after 36 years, and this was a key piece of evidence that the Cold War was ending and over, okay? Therefore, if you want to really simplify things, you could say the communists lost and the democratic capitalist world won. NATO remains, Warsaw Pact does not. Okay. Now this happened when I was in high school, perestroika, where this idea emerged in '79, but it was Mikhail Gorbachev that ran with it, and it meant restructuring, meaning the USSR changed the way it did business. It allowed foreign countries in, and with perestroika, I remember our popular music groups went over to Moscow, and Reebok and Pepsi and McDonald's were in Russia, which I could not believe as a high school student being brought up during the Cold War. So it was this restructuring, okay? And related to this was glasnost, this openness. And this resulted in American students going to Russia, musical artists, as I just said, businesses being exchanged. So perestroika and glasnost, very similar in terms of their outcome. You can lump them together, as a matter of fact. And when I was in high school and it was in the newspapers were these things that people used to read before the internet. It's crazy. It's how we got our information. You always saw perestroika and glasnost used almost within the same breath, okay? So 2 signs this was real. And again, a couple personal aside. I am not a hockey fan, but I know I live in hockey town, Detroit. The Detroit Red Wings got the Russian Five. We took Russian hockey players, and this was a big deal. All my buddies that were into hockey had, posters, and this was a sign of this perestroika and glasnost. The Wings went on to win a bunch of Stanley Cups because of these Russian athletes. And here's that picture of McDonald's in Russia. Probably the most American icon there is. McDonald's is there in Russia, okay? And last personal aside, my brother and I went to the same high school. He graduated in 95. I graduated in 92, and I had a very traditional geography teacher, and he made us fill in all the countries on these blank maps. I got this, the USSR. Every kid got that right, even if you were asleep the whole time. My brother had to learn all these new countries. So just in a 3-year difference, I got USSR. He got Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, okay, Moldova, Georgia, Armenia, okay, Turkmenistan. He had a tougher gig than me, so that makes me happy inside. But I just want to illustrate how fast things changed. It changed very, very quickly. Okay, so going full circle here, that was the material. So if you missed the first day of class, check out these links, the pop culture side, fill in this worksheet based on this. If you missed the second day, click on this rectangle, and you will see there is some material here, and there are some questions, but the big thing would be this SAQ, which we are going to look at in great detail to make sure you are prepared for the SAQ part on your exam. So that is it, and I appreciate you watching.